Are you a prepper? I say that word often has a connotation of someone who has some bug out in the desert, buried in the ground with 7 years of food and 7 years of water, and they're going to somehow survive the Great Tribulation. But that's not really what I'm talking about. I don't think that applies to anybody here. But are you a prepper? Well, let me put it another way. Are you prepared? Are you prepared? Turn to Proverbs 22. Proverbs 22 and verse 3. The prudent sees danger and hides himself, but the simple go on and suffer for it. So today I'm going to talk about preparation, primarily physical preparation. Certainly spiritual is important. But I'm going to do this in light of the things that are going on in this world right now. I'm not going to talk about the tribulation, when it might start. I'm not going to talk about the mark of the beast or any of the other end time scenarios. How far away these things are, I don't have a clue. But I am going to talk about what might very well happen in the coming days and weeks and months in our immediate future, whether we're entering end times or not. Again, a prudent man foresees danger. What is prudent? Well, one meaning is sensible, as opposed to foolish. It also means perceptive, able to recognize danger, foresee it, and includes a bit of wisdom as well. Proverbs talks a lot about this, as in Proverbs 12:16, we see the anger of a fool becomes readily apparent, but the prudent person overlooks an insult. The prudent person can perceive that sometimes he should just keep his mouth shut and not start a fight. It's wisdom, it's perception. The prudent foresees danger, he can see what is coming, and he prepares himself. The alternative is to be the simpleton, pass on, and suffer the consequences. Turn a blind eye to the current conditions. So what are some of these conditions we need to look out for? I think first and foremost in our society currently is the COVID crisis, which continues on in a lot of ways. As winter approaches, we may see more flu cases, more colds, and more illnesses. We may see more variants. We may see more in the hospital. We may see more deaths. We may see more lockdowns and more fear throughout society. And if you think last year's lockdowns were bad, you can take a look at what's going on in some other countries right now. In France, you have to, last I heard anyway, you have to have a pass just to get into a restaurant. And a restaurant owner that lets you in can be thrown in jail. Australia, some places you can't even leave your house for more than an hour a day. If you think those things cannot happen here, you might be right. I hope you are, but in case you aren't right, are you prepared? You ready for something like that to happen? There are some today, I'm not going to talk very much about vaccines, but there are some today who say, if only everybody had gotten vaccinated, we could have put this behind us. There are others who say, if only nobody had gotten vaccinated, we could have put this behind us. There are people who are strongly driven to get everybody vaccinated, and some of those people are in positions of power in the media and in the government, and they think life should be very, very difficult for those who are not vaccinated. There have been calls for any or all of these things for the unvaccinated. They want to prevent you from working. They want to reduce your paycheck if you do work by forcing you to have daily tests and pay for them. They want to deny medical care, dental care, even at private offices. They want to prevent you from taking out insurance or making it more costly, suspend your driver's license, your automobile registration, which means you really couldn't even purchase a car, and cancel your credit cards. You've heard some about that recently. Not allow you to have a bank account, to take out a loan. Could suspend Social Security payments, Medicare payments, pensions, government pensions. Could ban access to restaurants, grocery stores, gyms, airplanes, sports arenas. It's really a real push to get everybody vaccinated. It's been even suggested that there be a vaccine requirement to cross state lines. Federal agents would be stationed at the border asking for your papers. Now, this is for the unvaccinated, but in Israel right now, where they are pushing hard to get the third shot, they are close to treating those who have only gotten two the same as if they hadn't gotten any at all. And so if we think that this won't affect the vaccinated, it will impact everybody. 1 Thessalonians 5. A brief scripture here, you don't have to turn to it. First Thessalonians 5 and verse 6. Therefore, let us not sleep as others do, but let us watch and be sober. And we see some of these things that are taking place. Sober, I think, is a pretty appropriate word. So COVID is in the forefront, but some of the consequences of our fight against COVID are affecting us kind of severely. Thousands of businesses have gone out of business completely. They aren't coming back. And many are still just hanging on by a thread. They're either not allowed to open, or they're restricted, or they can't find workers, or they have to pay them more. And this plays into the increasing problems with both the price of goods and services and the supply chain that provides them. Fewer workers means there's some clogs in these chains. Both Bloomberg News and CNN News have both report disruptions in the vast network of ports, container vessels, trucking. There are currently a record number of ships outside of Los Angeles and Long Beach that are waiting to unload, but the chain is blocked. That will affect what we see on our shelves. General Motors and Ford sharply reducing production of vehicles due, in their case, to a chip shortage. But it seems to be spreading throughout our society. Will there be mass shortages soon, even of food? Are you prepared for that possibility? We remember the toilet paper scare last year. Of course, that was minor. But if it's food, people are going to be far more desperate. And remember, there's New Testament warnings about how this shall come upon you like a snare. Now, that's talking about end-time events, which I am not talking about, but the principle's made, the point's made. There's also the drought in the West affecting food, water. And we haven't even talked about how the government is wildly inflating the money supply. June and July inflation numbers were the highest they've been in years, and it's likely to get worse. Are you prepared for that? There is the extreme situation that the U.S. monetary supply could even collapse if the printing of worthless dollars that we don't have turns us into a Venezuelan type of hyperinflation, or might the world start to lose confidence in what is the standard world monetary unit now? That would devastate our dollar, which could largely become worthless. And how does that affect our savings, our retirement, our pensions, Social Security payouts, all of that? Are you ready for that possibility? I know it's extreme, but unfortunately it does need to be thought about. There are reasons to be afraid, but the Bible tells us hundreds of times, be ye not afraid. There's some studies that say it's in the Bible 365 times, once for each day of the year. I don't know how accurate that is, but it's in there a lot. 2 Timothy 1 has a point on that. Second Timothy 1 and verse 7, for God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of a sound mind. I think the media and the government are trying to instill fear in us, but if we are prepared physically and mentally and spiritually, there's really nothing to be afraid of, is there? We're ready. Okay, we're ready. We might not like what we're seeing, but we can eliminate a lot of that fear with spiritual and physical readiness. We are blessed in that way to have contact with God, to know God, and we can depend on God where we fall short. It's also kind of interesting to watch this from a distance. We know how it ends up eventually. And to watch this from that perspective is a measure of comfort, too, I think. But it is comforting to know that God will be with us, especially if we're prudent. There's more bad things. Don't mean to be the doomsday predictor here today, and I'm not predicting necessarily any of this. But Homeland Security recently published traits of possible terrorists. And one of those traits was those who observe religious holidays. You see that list? Look at us. Everybody in here is a possible terrorist. You believe that? How might that play out? I don't know. Psalm 118, verse 6, the Lord is with me. I will not be afraid. What can mere mortals do to me? God's with us, that's right. Psalm 118, verse 6, that is. There's more. Sorry. What about the BLM and Antifa movements? They're destroying whole swaths of major cities. It's not that close to home yet. The movement to defund the police, we're seeing predictably large increases in shootings in Portland and Chicago and New York and Philadelphia. Could it happen here? Well, a prudent man would discern that. Further, the LGBTQXYZ movement continues to transform our society into ways that are anti-God. Abortion is considered a right by many. Some of the pro-abortionists in Texas are going crazy over their restrictive law that was just enacted or just put in place. And homelessness. Now, that's something that does affect us here in San Diego, and it could get much worse, especially now that the eviction moratorium has been removed. There may be more and more homeless people on the streets. How are we going to deal with that? I'm not just saying we need to stay away from them and ignore them. No, do we need to show compassion? Do we need, how do we do this? Something to be prepared for. On top of all that, what if we have an electromagnetic pulse? We haven't heard about this for a couple of years, but it's still a possibility, whether it be a hostile country or whether it be a solar flare. I don't want to be the doomsday guy. I just want to encourage each of us to think about these things and prepare where we can. An EMP would result in more deaths than all these other things combined. It would fry most of the electrical circuits. There'd be no more transportation, no internet, no banking, no commerce, no communication, at least for a period of a year or two. Therefore, probably no food or water or heat or air conditioning. We can live here in San Diego without heat or air conditioning, but most of the rest of the country can't. Look in New Orleans right now. They had that hurricane through there. They're expecting about 3 weeks without power. Now, we don't have hurricanes here, but we have earthquakes. I could go on about the CDC plans to build camps to house the unvaccinated and the house-to-house vaccination squads, which right now are only informational. Could it be worse? There's more things I could look at, but let's remember some biblical principles. We should be prepared physically, but if we're not prepared spiritually, it's worthless. Luke 12. Luke 12, verse 15. One's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he possesses. And later in Luke 12, and do not seek for what you should eat or what you should drink, nor have an anxious mind, for all these things the nations of the world seek after. And your Father knows that you need these things. But seek first the kingdom of God, and all these things shall be added to you. That, of course, is no excuse not to prepare if you're a prudent man. 1 Timothy 5, verse 8 says, 1 Timothy 5, verse 8. But if anyone does not provide for his own, and especially for those of his household, he has denied the faith and is worse than an unbeliever. This is an obligation we all have. I think we can see the handwriting on the wall. Each of us needs to consider what we're going to do about that. But for today, we'll rejoice in God's day of trumpets.